How are you?
Good.
Welcome. Thanks very much for being here. So, yeah, how's it going?
You can ask me tough questions.
Yeah, it's very tough questions.
Softballs.
Yeah. You got a little red in the face just as you came out. Did you meditate today?
Always, yes. Of course.
Really? Do you do it every day?
Oh, yes. You don't?
You're being so judgmental. I meditated in the car on the way up here. I did one of your 1-minute meditations, which I do a lot. But I'm just curious, how many people? First of all, how many people in this audience meditate? Actually meditate, not just think about it, but actually do? Okay. How many people kind of think about it but haven't really done it? Okay. Yeah.
But
vast
the
majority.
same people raise their hands on both.
And that's really what this book is about. I mean, it's really, you kind of set out literally on a bus around the country to talk to people who want to meditate, because I know you're not a big proselytizer, but who, for whatever reason, have not started.
Yeah, so the halfway through the writing of the book, I had this idea at the beginning of the book. I was like, we're going to do a book, like a meditation book, like never has been done before. Halfway through the writing of the book, I was like, oh, there's a reason why nobody's written a book like this before. We tried to do a lot in the book, and the genesis of it was a reaction to a mistake I made in my first book. I wrote a book called 10% Happier that came out about 4 years ago, and in the book I tell my story of how I went from a meditation skeptic to somebody who uses it in his daily life. And I thought that if I told that story well, that people would hurl themselves into the lotus position and start meditating. And I was wrong. And that became really clear to me. And so after the book came out, I did a couple things. I started this app called 10% Happier, and then I also started a podcast also called 10% Happier for brand continuity reasons. And then I really, as part of working on this company, I got a front row seat at as what I call the rich pageant of human neuroses that stand in the way of adopting this manifestly beneficial practice. And so I wanted to do a book that would systematically taxonomize and tackle all of the obstacles. So that's what we do. We rented a bus. A guy who you'll meet in a moment, Jeff Warren, who's one of my favorite humans and an incredible meditation teacher. We get on a bus.
This was a bus that previously had been used by what band?
Parliament Funkadelic.
Parliament Funkadelic. Okay. All right.
So I'm reasonably confident we were the most boring people who ever occupied the bus. In fact, the driver was like, "You guys are really boring."
I was going to say, I imagine the driver was relieved when you guys showed up. He was like, "Thank God."
He thought we were a little weird.
Is that right?
Because we meditated a lot on the bus. He was like, "What is going on back there?" Yeah, he had a lot of funny stories about having some perilous moments when cops stopped the bus, but none of that happened with us.
You are so you can convince so many people to meditate. Even your wife has not taken up meditation.
Well,
are you qualified to write a book if you can't even get your wife to try it?
I didn't bring you in for the tough questions.
No, that's not a tough one. That's just a mocking question,
okay,
really.
Fair enough.
No, but I mean, you're right about that in the book. I think it's kind of one of the funny things in it. Also, like your coworker, your coworkers at ABC had suggested a title for what the sequel for 10% Happier should be. Do you remember what they suggested?
You want me to say it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My co-host said that the sequel should be called 10% Happier, but still a douchebag.
Right. Which I like very much.
Yeah. So my wife.
We're going to get to that, believe me.
Well, I mean, if it's not already readily apparent. My wife is ironically the person who got me started on the whole meditation thing because she gave me a book.
She's a doctor.
She's a physician. She gave me a book by another physician about meditation, and that really made me think, oh, I could do this thing. And I started acting in ways that were really annoying, lecturing her that she ought to do it, and that pretty much guarantee that she would never do it.
Which I gotta say, there is, I mean, the reason I sort of got involved in this is I did a piece for us on 60 Minutes about a guy named John Kabat-Zinn and about mindfulness meditation. I started going to a retreat and ended up really liking it. I went back without cameras and did a retreat with him. And that's sort of been trying to practice it since then. But there is a tendency when you start to meditate that you start to tell everybody else about that you're meditating. It's not enough to just meditate. You have to let everyone else in your life know you're meditating and lord it over them and extol its benefits. And finally, a friend of mine like looked at me and was just like, shut up. No one wants to hear about, you know. And of course, like 4 months later, there was a dip in my meditation practice. And then they were all like, oh, not meditating anymore. Don't hear you talking about it anymore.
It's like I like to use as an example this great cartoon that ran in the New Yorker. Had two women having lunch. One of them says to the other, "I've been gluten-free for a week and I'm already annoying." and meditation's like that. And the lesson I learned with Bianca was that if you proselytize in that way, it's really off-putting. So over time, I've learned that I don't talk about meditation unless somebody asks me or gives me a microphone and says, "Hold forth."
Right.
Because it's a shortcut.
One of the things that John Kabat-Zinn says about meditation is that it's not a should. It's not something that should become, oh, I should do this. And I think for a lot of people, I know I feel that way sometimes. I'm sure a lot of people here feel like, oh, it's another thing I should do and gotta do. But that's. If it's that, you shouldn't do it.
You know, Jeff, who we'll all meet in a moment, who is a hedonist by nature, really noticed that my practice, because we spent 11 days in this tin can traveling across the country together, and he noticed that my practice had a real should nature to it, kind of, I think he referred to it as a Baton Death March sort of flavor. And, like you could even see it in my face when we were meditating, and it's a little bit of a kind of grit your teeth type of thing. And what he did that allowed Bianca to start meditating, because it was Jeff who got Bianca to meditate, was to reframe it as a luxury. He made her a bespoke guided meditation that was called Taking Back Lazy. And it reframed meditation as something, he had her just sprawl out on the floor at the end of the day for just a minute and just enjoy the feeling, the physical sensations of being lazy. And then when you get distracted, start again and again and again. And that, I think, is one way to think about it.
One of the things you talk about in the book is that happiness is a skill.
Yeah.
Can you just explain what that actually means and how that relates to meditation?
For me, it's the animating insight. I mean, I had one job. I actually, many people might not know this, but when I moved here about 18 years ago to come to ABC News, I took over for Anderson Cooper. I was hired to replace Anderson Cooper.
I was an anchor of a late-night newscast called World News Now, which it was nursing mothers, night shift workers, and drunks watched. So
yeah. And coke addicts.
A lot of coke addicts. Yeah.
So
they were our least reliable viewers, but.
So I was hired to take over for Anderson for years. I mean, being at ABC News, I ended up moving on and doing lots of other things at ABC. But this was the only thing I cared about, and it still is a huge part of my life. But if there was one reason why I've launched this whole side hustle as a meditation proponent, it's that the mind is trainable. I mean, this is what the science is showing us. In recent years, scientists have been looking at the brains of meditators and finding that the brain can change. It used to be the received dogma in neuroscientific circles was that the brain stops changing at a certain age in your 20s. Not true. We are always changing our brains by whatever it is we choose to do. But if you choose to train your brain through meditation, you can rewire the parts that have to do with attention regulation, so distractedness, self-awareness, compassion, stress. And so all of the things we want the most, we may think of physical things when we think about things we want. Did my mic just die?
Yeah, I think so.
Am I loud enough that you can all hear me?
Heard
me say that. Let me just project.
They're going to bring you a mic here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All the things we want, when we think about things we want, we may imagine, a Ferrari, but the things we actually want are psychological and mental, that we want calm, we want happiness, we want gratitude, we want compassion. These are not factory settings that can't be changed. They are skills that can be trained. And that is huge.
This notion of being 10% happier.
Yeah.
I mean, you believe that you're 10% happier than you were before you were meditating?
No, I made that shit up. I mean, that's a complete... Did I say that out loud? I thought the mic was...
Your mic is actually still on, yeah.
It's not scientific. It was a joke I made to a colleague of mine who was asking me one day. The whole meditation thing, this is the first time in my life I've ever been ahead of a trend. So I started meditating in 2008 or 9 before it was cool. And a lot of my friends at work thought I was really weird for doing that. And one day I was talking to a friend, and she asked me, "Why are you meditating? What is wrong with you?" And I, out of nowhere, said, it makes me 10% happier. And I saw the look on her face went from scorn to something approaching interest. And I thought, that's my shtick. And so I just I stayed with it, although the publisher of my first book actually tried to negotiate me up to something like 20 or 30%.
That's right. But so how does it make you happier?
So I have a kind of a long-ish answer to that. Is that okay with you? Okay. Yeah, all right. We'll see if I hold him. So happiness, the word happiness, nobody really knows what it means. It's a completely vague word. The roots of the word reflect our cultural ambivalence about the subject. Hap, H-A-P, is the same root of the word hapless or haphazard. It means luck. It's as if happiness is something that happens to you. So I spent a lot of time asking experts, meditation gurus, how would you define happiness? And the best answer I got was initially underwhelming, but I'll expand on it in a second. Dr. Mark Epstein, who's one of my favorite writers about meditation, he's in fact the guy who wrote the first book I ever read about meditation, given to me by my wife. One night at dinner, I said, "How did you define happiness?" And he said, "More of the good stuff and less of the bad." Think about this. I'm terrible at math, which is why it's really uncomfortable that I have 10% happier and have to live with math jokes the rest of my life. Think about this like a graph. The x-axis, which runs horizontally, and then the y-axis. In psychological circles, they think about the x-axis is like our happiness set point. Good things can happen, but we tend to revert back to our set point. Bad things happen, we tend to go back to our set point. What I found is that with meditation, the good part is higher and more sustained because I'm not rushing off for the next hit of dopamine. I can actually pay attention to what's happening right now. For example, my wife and I, after a long infertility struggle, we had a kid. And I find that I am wringing so many moments of joy out of being around this little monster that otherwise I think I would have been just taking it for granted, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the downside, when bad things happen, I think it's shorter and shallower, that I'm not lost in endless tangents of self-laceration or useless rumination, and I can recover. And then meantime, I would say that the happiness set point, the x-axis, moves up.
See, I feel that way, but I'm just heavily medicated. So what's the... No, I'm not really heavily medicated.
Okay, no judgment here, dude.
No.
It's a safe space.
Since there are so many people in this audience who, have kind of flirted with the idea of meditation but actually haven't done it, you go through kind of systematically in the book all the reasons people don't meditate, and sort of you try to address them. And a lot of them, basically, it's trying to get people over the hump of actually doing it. Yeah. What are the big ones you encounter?
I think the two biggest are, I don't have time for this, and I can't clear my mind. So let me just attack both of them. On the, I don't have time for this, which I think is, frankly, in many cases, the biggest issue.
Right.
I have good news and better news. The good news is that I think 5 to 10 minutes a day is a great habit. Everybody wants to know what's the least I can do and derive all of the advertised scientific benefits, which is legit. So I spent a lot of time asking. We don't know the answer is the short answer, but I've spent a lot of time with the neuroscientists who look at what happens to the brain when you meditate. And I asked, is 5 to 10 minutes probably enough? And the answer is probably enough.
How much do you meditate a day?
Let me hold on that for
Okay, all right.
because that's a whole other thing.
So 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes, but the better news, so that's the good news. The better news is 1 minute counts.
Right.
You mentioned that you were doing a 1 minute meditation.
I do a lot of 1 minute, and I do a lot meditating in car. The other thing, which we'll get to, is kind of what you call free range meditation, which I actually do a lot of. I do a lot in airport. I do walking in airports. I'm on planes all the time. I just was on a plane today. I meditate on planes. I meditate in cars, in the back of cars, going places.
This sounds to me like a great habit you got going.
It's actually amazing because suddenly a car ride, so I no longer multitask, I only monotask. So I won't do more than one thing at once. So if I'm sitting in a car, I'm sitting in a car, I'm not on my phone. And I try to observe what I'm passing, and I feel the air in my face. And if I'm walking through an airport, I'm not on my phone, or I'm walking, and I'm trying to feel my feet walking. So all these things are meditative practices. Yeah. And that way I don't have to sit in a lotus position for 30 minutes a day.
You don't. I mean, if you keep doing this, you're going to get enlightened soon. But actually, I mean, I'm making fun of you, but that actually sounds like a great meditation habit. And it is one of the ways in which you can get over this I think is mostly a psychological hurdle. We have this, I think, a perception of time starvation, but 5 to 10 minutes isn't that much time. And if you feel like you don't have that, 1 minute actually counts. And if you feel like you don't have 1 minute, you can make a lot of things you do into meditations. The other big obstacle that we talked about is I can't clear my mind. So this is a pernicious misconception, and it gets in the way of a lot of people's practices. And the thing to know is that clearing your mind is impossible unless you're enlightened or dead. And the whole game with meditation is not to clear the mind, it's to focus the mind for nanoseconds at a time, usually on the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. And then when you get distracted, you start again and again and again. And that moment of getting distracted is the moment when most people, myself included, assume they failed. You see, like, oh, wow, I'm just all over the place. And you tell yourself, oh, I can't do this. No, that moment when you see that you're distracted is the victory, and is a victory of real consequence, because when you see how nuts you are, it no longer owns you. And that is what we're doing in this practice. Over and over and over again, we're seeing, oh my God, the voice in my head is just offering up these terrible ideas, and I can learn to surf them rather than drowning in them. And that is as simple as it is. To answer the other question you asked, how much meditation do I do?
Right.
I always hesitate to answer this question because people think I'm crazy.
It's going to freak people out.
Yes, 2 hours a day.
Wow.
Yes.
All at once?
No, definitely not. I got it in my head. I mean, I got it in my head that 2 hours a day was what serious meditators do. I have no idea where I got this from, but for years I kind of perseverated about this because I thought there's no way I can do that. And then a friend of mine, Sharon Salzberg, who's one of the greatest living meditation teachers, mentioned to me that she knew a guy who wanted to get to 2 hours a day, and he'd said to himself, I can do as many sits as I want, wherever I want, whenever I want. And just the goal is to get to 2 hours by the end of the day. So I started doing that. My mistake was I started doing it without asking my wife's permission first. Didn't go over super well, but now we've got a nice system, I think. Where is she? She's looking at me like, Mets and Mets. We have a reasonably good system, and, I have a funny schedule. I work nights during the week, early mornings during the weekend. I travel a ton, just like you. And so I have a lot of opportunities to do it in planes and cars, et cetera.
Right. The other thing I think that's interesting about meditation is I always, before when I was just interested in it and actually hadn't done it, is sort of the obstacle of just getting started. And but the interesting thing about it is you don't need like a yoga mat. You don't need to go to Lululemon and buy a whole meditation outfit. Thankfully, it hasn't been monetized in that way that, there's all this stuff you need to get. It's basically you just sitting and doing it.
But I now have this visual of you in a Lululemon.
Yes, no, it's, yeah. It's not a good look.
No, but as I often say, you don't need to. There are thousands of kinds of meditation, but the kind of meditation I'm talking about is called mindfulness meditation, and it is secular and it is simple, scientifically validated in many ways. You don't have to join a group. You don't have to believe in anything. You don't need special outfits. You don't need to sit in a funny position. Learning all of what I just said is what allowed me to do the thing in the first place.
I actually started doing a class in TM, Transcendental Meditation, and I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but they, with great secrecy, give you a mantra, and then they're like, oh, don't tell anybody else your mantra. And I was doing this with two of my friends, and suddenly, gradually, over the course of time, we realized, and they make it seem like this mantra is special for you. They get the same friggin' mantra to the two other guys. I'm like, what? And I got so pissed, I just stopped. I was like, turns out there's only like 4 mantras in the world anyway. It's like a whole big...
My brother's kids do TM, and they're quite young, and you can definitely get their mantra out of them very
fast.
Yeah.
But the other... I mean, there's a couple of other things I think that are obstacles and that you talk about in the book. One is the fear of losing your edge. Like kind of that it's going to make you somehow soft, and I mean, you're in this book. You talk to cadets at a military academy. You're talking to police officers.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge fear. This is the fear that I really struggle with. That I remember my father, who's a really ambitious Type A academic physician up in Boston. He had a slogan, which was a little motto that was, "The price of security is insecurity," which is a great thing to tell a kid, by the way. It'll shock you to hear that my dad is Jewish. So I remember telling my dad that I was getting interested in meditation. He was like, oh yeah, I know some people who did that, and they became like totally ineffective. And there's this idea that if you become too happy, that you'll lose your edge. And actually what I learned is that is actually to conflate happiness with complacency. That being happy is not the same thing as resting on your laurels and not trying or passively letting the world walk all over you. Being happy is, as I understand it, is to be fully engaged in what you're doing and to find meaning in what you're doing. And so I really do believe that if you're going to do anything great, that it does involve a certain amount of stress and plotting and planning. I mean, look, you never take a day off. You work on 60 Minutes. You have your own show. You've written books. You've done documentary movies. You're working all the time. Same with me. I have a couple shows on ABC. I have a podcast. I have an app. I'm writing books. What I think is that involves inevitably a certain amount of stress. But what meditation helps you do is to draw the line between useless rumination, making your stress worse than it needs to be, and what I call constructive anguish. And that is a huge... Don't steal that. And I think it's a huge... that changes everything, because when you can notice that you've crossed the line into useless rumination, and you can pull yourself back, that boosts your resiliency, you stop wasting as much energy, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. The other thing that I wrestle with is, you're in a hotel room, and I know you talk about this in the book, the fear of your own thoughts, the fear of, oh my God, wait a minute, I'm going to lose myself in these thoughts or give in to them. Like, I'm in a hotel room, I would turn on, go into a hotel room, turn on the television, I'd order room service, I'd be on my phone, I'd be trying to cram as much possible into this moment so that the silence of the hotel room in some strange city and the loneliness of it did not completely overwhelm me. And now, I mean, I'm not there yet, but I'm much more comfortable just not having the television on, not being on my phone, not cramming stuff into my mouth in room service, and just sitting in a room and just being. And it's sort of, it's a liberating power, actually.
Absolutely. We spend so much time trying to distract ourselves from the fact that we're alive.
And these things are designed to, I mean, it's like crack. I mean,
you had a great piece on 60 about
right.
They
specifically, they call it brain hacking. I mean, it's specifically designed to give you hits of dopamine, to raise your cortisol levels, and to keep you coming back. It's true. I mean, it's totally manipulative.
What's amazing is that meditation has taken off in Silicon Valley in such a
Well, yes.
robust way, and the people who are designing the
Totally.
products and services that are destroying our ability to
Right.
focus
Yeah,
are doing this thing to boost their own.
Yeah, in fact, the meditation retreat I often go to once a year, it's all these tech people in Silicon Valley, and they often like start off meetings just like, let's just breathe for 2 minutes. And I'm like, you're creating these machines which are like making us slaves to this, and yet you're getting all the benefits of meditation. But
we're in the wrong line of work. But you let me just pick up on what you said about people being afraid of their thoughts. We have a whole chapter where we get into this. We call it Pandora's box. It is a very legitimate fear where you're worried that if you sit, that all of the stuff that maybe you've not wanted to confront will come up, and it may.
Yeah.
It may not, but it may. And I don't think we should hide the ball on that. But I guess there are two things to say about it. One is better to see it than not to see it, because it's there and driving you blind, and it's blindly propelling you in all sorts of directions. And so when you see it, you have a better chance of kind of working with it skillfully rather than just being owned by it. The other thing to say is that if you suffer with what you believe to be true trauma or mental illness, you should, before you adopt this practice, talk to a mental health professional, which
because
I am not.
it can actually
Yes.
have negative effects.
It can.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's pretty rare, but especially if if you're working with a serious diagnosis, talk to your doctor first.
I'm wondering once you started, how quickly did you start to notice, mild benefits or just slight differences in your life?
So the first sign for me that it was starting to work was when I would overhear Bianca at parties telling people I was less of an asshole.
Really?
Yeah. And I thought, okay, that was actually before I noticed anything. Uh-huh. And I mean, maybe it speaks to how low the bar was.
Right, yeah. You still seem like an asshole to me, but no, kidding.
I didn't see that coming. I like that. That's good. Can we do New Year's together next year?
Yeah, sure.
There are three really big benefits that I started to notice pretty quickly. One is calm. I think this is the act of taking yourself out of the traffic. I'm using that term sort of metaphorically. The act of just kind of stepping out of the busyness for just a few minutes a day just injects the whole scene with some calm. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be clear though. People sometimes, one of the worst things you can do in meditation is to expect to feel a certain way. That doesn't mean the meditation itself is going to be calming. The point of meditation isn't to, hop into a bubble bath. The point of meditation is to feel whatever you're feeling clearly so that it doesn't yank you around. The second benefit for me is focus. This is one of the things that shows up on the brain scans. When you do this repeated exercise of trying to focus on one thing at a time, usually your breath, noticing you become distracted and starting again and again and again, this is like a bicep curl for your brain, and the parts of the brain that regulate our attentional capacities do change. And the third is mindfulness, which is a word that's become super, everybody's talking about, I'm being mindful. I don't think often people know what they're talking about. But one simple way to think of mindfulness is just the ability to see what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. And that is huge because we have all of this tumult in our heads. And when you don't see it, it's sort of a malevolent puppeteer. When you see it, you have a better chance of working with it.
Yeah, John Kabat-Zinn talks about it's like walking through a waterfall, turning around, and you're in sort of the cave behind the waterfall, and you're actually able to see the water, the thoughts coming in, just this rush of this torrent of thoughts, which is constantly occurring.
Well, and I love this idea of being behind the waterfall that John talks about. And there's a way in which if you hear this and you're uninitiated, you can think, that sounds a little mystical, but we are classified as a species as Homo sapiens sapiens, the one who thinks and knows he or she thinks. This is our birthright, but nobody bothers to point out that we have this kind of bonus level in our brain that we are able to step behind the waterfall and see our thoughts and urges and impulses with some non-judgmental remove.
It's interesting because, I'm sort of off Twitter now as much as possible, but Twitter to me is a physical representation of the constant stream of our thoughts. And you look at Twitter and you're like, oh, this is exhausting, all cares what this person whose picture is a cat or an egg is thinking, and why are they yelling at me and calling me bad names? And it's this constant stream, and you can put that down, but that constant stream is in your head as well. I mean,
Yes, absolutely. That's just a manifestation of what the Buddhists call monkey mind. Just the mind is just all over the place. I think for a while my avatar might have been a cat.
I was talking about you, actually. But it actually gets me to my next point, which is one of the things I really I love about your books, and I loved about 10% Happier, and this one is that I remember vividly, before I'd actually started meditating, looking for books on like Buddhism or meditation, and I could never get past the second or third page because they were either very, I don't know if esoteric is the right word, but they would sort of drop in all these Sanskrit terms, which I would then, I would start to feel anxious that I don't know Sanskrit, and then I didn't really understand Sanskrit. And I mean, what's funny about your books is they're very well written, they're very funny, and you sort of take the piss out of a lot of that and use yourself as kind of the foil on it. I mean, you did mention one Sanskrit word, I will say, which actually I think is actually a really interesting word, prapanka? Prapancha.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Well, first of all,
because I love the definition of what this is.
It's a great word. But just to get back where you're saying, first of all, thank you for that. I always joke that there are no original ideas in my books. There are so many great Buddhist books, but the problem is that when you read them, sometimes it feels like there's a pan flute playing in the background, or that the author is kind of addressing you as grasshopper. Right. And so I realized, maybe I'll take a shot at this. And basically my innovation was I use the F word a lot. But there are some Sanskrit or Pali words that are incredibly useful, because with the Buddhists, you can tell a lot about a culture by the words they invent. I mean, like that the Germans came up with Schadenfreude tells you something. But the Buddhists were really they are experts at seeing all of the little psychological and mental tics we have that we can just, in English, take sentences to describe, but they have a word. So prapancha is what happens when something happens to you, like you stub your toe, for example, and then immediately you make this movie of like, oh my God, why am I always the person who stubs his toe? I'm not going to be able to go to dinner tonight. I'm not going to be able to exercise tomorrow. I'm going to end up homeless under a bridge. It's like, that is just, it's that fast, and that's prapancha. That the mental movie making that we do. In fact, it literally translates to the imperialistic tendency of mind. That something happens now, and we colonize the future with this phantasmagoric projections. If you can see it, which is the whole game in meditation, then you can step off the train and not be owned by it.
And that's what meditation is about. It's about seeing the thoughts, seeing them come, and watching them go, and releasing them.
There are many things that meditation is about, but at least for me as a beginner, that for me has been the big benefit, mindfulness, to know what's happening between my ears without just being owned by it all the time. And prapancha is one of the things that happens.
But it's not stopping the thoughts. It's not clearing the mind. It's not stopping the thoughts. It's not, suddenly thinking, oh, I like grapes. I mean, while you're trying to meditate, it's seeing all that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because people think they need to stop thinking. And as we said, every 8-year-old tries the experiment of trying to stop thinking, and you realize this is impossible. The point is not to clear your mind or to stop all of the mental activity. It's to have a different relationship to it, to allow it to come and go. So you might have the thought, I like grapes, which I don't know why you were having, but whatever. So you're having this thought, I like grapes.
Actually, Ellen DeGeneres used that in a comedy routine like 30 years ago. I don't know why it popped into my head, but it just
well, I mean, that's the thing about the mind. Why are these things popping into the head? But you don't have to get on the train of like, I like grapes, I'm going to get some later today, but why are they pricing them in? Is it green or red? And like the way the mind does, you can just let the thought come and go. Sometimes you will get on the train and you're at Whole Foods in your mind picking between green or red. But you can, at any point, you can get off and see how this works.
The thing I stumble on with meditation, and you talk about this in the book, is people talk about loving kindness and sort of embracing these things or your thoughts with compassion. And I don't quite, as a wasp who was taught to push all my emotions deep down inside, the idea of expressing compassion for others, let alone myself, is hard to imagine. So what is that? Like, what is that? The whole loving kindness thing.
So you're asking me what is being nice to other people?
No, I mean, I work in television. I'm unfamiliar with it. So, no, but I mean, the idea of using loving kindness in watching your own thoughts. It's not about being nice to other people.
Okay, so, well, but it can be. So back to the Buddha. I can't believe I'm a guy who talks about the Buddha. This is not, when I took your job and back 18 years ago, I didn't think I'd be talking about the Buddha publicly at any point. One of the complaints about the whole mindfulness revolution, the fact that meditation has become so popular, is that we focus on things like focus and mindfulness and calm, and we don't talk a lot about compassion, which was, back in the Buddha's day, they taught two practices often in conjunction. It's still taught this way in many contexts to this day. You learn the basic mindfulness meditation where you feel your breath coming in, and then you get distracted, you start again. Also, there are a set of practices known as compassion practices or loving kindness practices where this is going to sound incredibly annoying, and the fact is, it is incredibly annoying. I've described these practices as Valentine's Day with a knife to your throat, where you sit and systematically envision people, including yourself, and you repeat phrases in your mind. May you be happy, may you be well, et cetera, et cetera. So again, really like systematized, saccharine approach to a practice. But the science shows that this actually works, that it has health benefits, including lowering the release of cortisol in the brain, the stress hormone, that it can make you overall healthier, and it can change behavior. One study done at the University of Wisconsin with kids who were taught how to do this practice, the preschoolers, they were more likely to give their stickers away to kids they didn't know than the kids who didn't get taught that. And I can tell you, I have a 3-year-old at home. That's a really big deal. He has not learned this practice.
Right, yeah.
But it's important not only in terms of your behavior in the world, but how you treat yourself. And one of the things I learned in the writing of this book with having Jeff around, like living in close quarters with a great meditation teacher, was he noticed that when we talked about the baton death march nature of my practice, that even though I go around and tell everybody that the whole game in meditation is just to notice when you become distracted, start again, don't worry about it. That, in fact, I was a huge hypocrite. That in my own practice, when I got lost, I was just engaging in endless self-laceration. And because I somehow thought that the whole third step of meditation, which is the key that you notice you become distracted and start again, I thought that was for other people and that I was going to win at meditation. But it turns out that's not the way it works. And Jeff really got me to start being nicer to myself, and that has changed the whole nature of my practice.
So Jeff's gonna come out and everyone can, if you want, do a meditation.
No, you don't have a choice.
Right, yeah, and then we're gonna open up to questions. I think some people have been writing questions on cards, and we'll get those. You described Jeff Warren, who's the co-author of this book, as the MacGyver of meditation. How is he the MacGyver of meditation?
Because you'll see it when he talks. This guy, he's just got this palpable love of the practice. And he loves talking to people about meditation. What is stopping you from doing it? What's going on with you right now? I'll come up with a practice for that. Everybody we met on this trip, he was like, he would invent them personalized meditation practices, record them and send them audio. He just loves to get under the hood, and whatever your problem is, he'll just grab some duct tape and pliers and fix it, just like MacGyver could. And so that's why I started calling him that. And he brings the same sort of spirit of adventurousness and enthusiasm to the job.
Cool. Well, let's bring him out. Jeff Warren.
How are you? Yeah. Oh man, that's bound to be an anticlimax now.
I was hesitant to write the book with him because he's so much better looking than I am, but
Right.
Here we are.
Yeah.
He hates when I make that joke.
What do you want to do?
You guys want to meditate? Let me try it
All
out.
right, sweet.
Okay. So, let's think here. I always worry about this part being an anticlimax because we are just going to be sitting with our eyes closed doing nothing. after all. But what we'll actually find out is that we're not exactly doing nothing, because what matters in meditation is it's less important what you're paying attention to than the way you're paying attention. So I thought for this little very short practice, I would do a little exploration with you guys about the way you're paying attention. And what that means is we'll choose something to pay attention to. So the breath is a good one, or maybe sounds, sort of the ambient sounds in the room. And once you get settled on that, I'll just do a few pointer outers to show you sort of how to pay attention. Does that make sense?
Sure.
All right, and you guys are included in this, so. All right, so first thing is to choose if you want to have your eyes closed or open. If you have them open, they can be sort of at half-mast in front of you. I like having them closed, but it's kind of up to you. So you got the eyes closed, and maybe we start by taking a couple of deep breaths. So inhaling through the nose, stretching up the spine a little bit, finding some alertness. And then on the exhale is the downward motion, kind of relaxing. And let's choose something to pay attention to. So the classic one is the sensation of the breath coming in the nose, maybe the feeling of the belly rising a little bit. And that really is a good enough sensation, more than good enough. Took the Buddha all the way to enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, apparently, so it has a good pedigree. So the idea is if you use that sensation is just to really get curious about the feeling, the actual sensation, the way your nose gets tickled a little bit, or the way the belly feels like it stretches a bit. So that's one option, but some other options for folks who don't like the breath, you could just pay attention to the feeling of the warmth in your hands. Or if you want to work with sound, you can just pay attention to that ambient hum, the sound of a generator or whatever it is in the background. And the first skill of meditation, the first skill of attention is concentration. So that means you choose a sensation. So whatever, if you've been looking around a little bit, choose one now, and you commit to it. You say, you know what, I'm going to stay with this for the next few minutes, even if it's very boring seeming or not that exciting. So really zooming into the sensation of breath of the nose or the belly or the tingling in the hands. The mind wanders, you bring it back. Every time you do that, I think Dan said before, it's like a rep for the mind, building the concentration muscle. So concentration is tricky, but it builds with time. But there's a few other skills that we're working on. And the second skill is, it's called equanimity. And what that means is, I think of it as not being uptight. So just notice, are you a bit straining? Are you a bit tense? And seeing if you can sort of, breathe out and relax a little bit. Relax the face and let the belly be soft. It's sort of an affability in the way you're sitting. So you're allowing surrounding sounds to be there, for example. Noticing if you're bracing against sound, or can you just let go of that bracing, soften, allowing the whole experience to be what it is. The sneezes, the inner caffeinated thought track, the discomfort, the stomach gurglings. It's all good. Just come back to the sensation of breathing. But now you're doing it in this equanimous way, this non-uptight way. So it makes it nice because you don't need any particular conditions to be, quote, right. Whatever's going on is just fine. So our third skill is clarity. can you be really clear about the subtler aspects of whatever it is you're paying attention to? So if it's the breath, the soft underside of the breath, the subtlest part of the breath, if it's sound, same thing, really listening to the undercurrents of sound. And there's a curiosity piece here. Good, and naturally as we begin to sit, often our breath might slow down on its own, start to get a little bit more settled. And I'll just introduce one last skill, since these guys were talking about it before I came on, and that's the skill of friendliness. Can you actually relate to your own experience in a kind of affable way? Like you're enjoying breathing and you like the feeling of breathing. Even slightly charmed by the sensation of breathing or sounds. That just changes the nature of the experience. Often it can make it a little bit more enjoyable. You guys are doing great. Just another minute or two. Say 1 minute. Just breathing in, breathing out. Letting the whole experience just be what it is. And all right, when you guys are ready, you can open your eyes. You are now officially all seasoned meditators. 5 minutes deep into a practice. Thank you.
Jeff sometimes ends his meditations by saying, "Welcome to the cult."
So we have a number of questions that we'll ask to both of you. Let's see. Well, someone says, do you use a mantra to meditate?
Do I or can you?
Yeah. Or can you, or do you?
Yeah, occasionally I've tried it out. I like to try the different techniques to see how they work. The mantra technique is terrific for building concentration. Some people find it really helps to...
Yeah, for those who don't know, can you explain what a mantra is?
Yeah, so a mantra is you basically just repeat a phrase in your head. And there's the classic sort of Sanskrit phrases, which apparently have particular tones or sounds that do something to the nervous system. But you can use any phrase. You could say, "Here I am meditating." Here I am meditating, still meditating. Or you could count your breath. That's a kind of mantra. And what people like about it is that it can kind of take up some of the bandwidth of your thinking. So it can, for some people, really helps them to get concentrated. And there's a kind of hypnotic thing that happens with it as well. But it's not for everyone. So it's something that you could try out. Like I've explored it for, like I'll be on a week retreat. I remember I did a week retreat where I basically just did it in mantra the whole time just to see what would happen. And it was interesting.
What's the longest retreat you've done?
There are people who do like 3-year retreats, which is insane. But no, I'd done a month retreat. That was the longest one, and I almost went insane, actually. It was early on in my meditation career.
So was it silent?
Yeah. It was silent. It was alone, and that was the hard part. I was in a cabin alone. I had a teacher who would come in.
That's
once.
not a treat. That's the Unabomber.
That's what I felt like by day 4. It was basically plotting the overthrow of America. Yeah, being Canadian.
That was your mantra.
Yeah. Soon they will know me.
Sure, they won't know me.
They will remember.
Here, a question, what's with the ohm?
I mean, I'm not an expert on ohm. Is again, I think it's a Sanskrit syllable. It's used a lot in yogic and Hindu practices. I'm not sure if it's such a Buddhist thing, but apparently there's something about that syllable. It's some kind of elemental sound that the mystics say has some particular resonance that goes back to, the Big Bang or something. I have no idea. I'm not an expert on it, but it sounds nice.
Another question, is enlightenment the goal?
Is enlightenment? It is in some traditions. So enlightenment's a very confusing and controversial subject, but there are many traditions that make an explicit goal out of, including Buddhism, out of the end of suffering. I mean, Buddhism is about, Buddha means the awakened one, and the idea is that awakening is a real thing, and that you can dramatically change your relationship to your life in a way where you don't have chronic suffering. And so that is absolutely a goal in some schools and traditions.
I mean, one thing that people often ask, what is enlightenment? And what I like to say is, ironically, as soon as you start talking about enlightenment, you're in an argument. Because people have been fighting about what it is for millennia. There are a couple ways to think about it. Jeff knows way more about this than I do, but one way to think about it, the classical Buddhist definition is the uprooting of all negative emotions. So you're just no longer capable of experiencing anger, hatred, in the same way that most of us do. Another way to think about it, and this is a word that's a little controversial, but oneness. When you transcend your small, chattering ego and connect to everything. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that was good. I mean, I might just say something quickly about the uprooting of. The thing about it is, it may sound so lofty and remote, and it certainly is, but you can think of it as a kind of continuum. There is definitely, in a practice, the experience of seeing a negative emotion come up and being less automatic about it, feeling like you have more space around it, and that actually gets noticeable the longer you practice. I've never met anyone who doesn't, even the most hardcore, long-term, 50-year-old meditators who doesn't experience negative emotions. What I do see is they have a surge of something, and it comes up, and then it passes right through them, and they don't deliberate on it at all. It's kind of come here, gone. Even the Dalai Lama will say he'll get angry about something, and then it's like 1 second later, he's over. There's no refractory period. That is something that's, I think.
Can you imagine if you're the one who pisses off the Dalai Lama? I mean, it's got to feel really bad.
There are actually stories about that.
Really?
Yeah, where because he does get into bad. He'll admit that he does get into bad moods. But I think that the important thing is it's easy to get, and I've gone down. I think both of us have gone down the road of getting hung up on the issue of enlightenment. But one way to think about it that makes it more accessible is there's an expression in meditation circles of short moments many times, that you can experience for short moments what it's like to be enlightened, in that anytime you notice anger arising and you let it pass without biting the hook, that is what the mind of an enlightened person does when anger comes up. And so if you can practice that short moments many times, then you're getting many of the same benefits. Whether it is possible to become fully enlightened, I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence. But it's an interesting idea.
I like this question. Who says you have to be happy?
Good question.
I mean, that gets at the issue of what is happiness, right? What are you talking about when you talk about happiness? That's why it's such a maddening word. A lot of people make the point, and I actually agree with this, that it's better to focus on meaning than happiness. But again, I don't know what the person who wrote that had in mind, but it is often the case that people conflate happiness not only with complacency, but also with excitement, that you're getting what you want, that you're getting ice cream right now, or you're getting a pay raise, or you've just hit the lottery. But that's excitement, as opposed to what I'm thinking of when I talk about happiness, which is a sort of a deeper peace of mind and contentment and ability to sort of kind of surf reality.
But to me, the subtext of the question, and I don't think it's something you're pushing, is the notion that which I don't think is a notion you would. I mean, that it's okay to not be happy. I mean, it's okay to be sad about something. It's okay to be with your thoughts on something.
Absolutely. Meditation isn't about There's this great thing this meditation teacher named Ram Dass talks about, that meditation isn't going to conquer all of your neuroses. It makes you a connoisseur of your neuroses. And it's like and there's actually, that can become fun when you see, oh my God, this is like, I've got some crazy shit going on right now. And you can become like a sommelier of the thing. It's like, wow, okay, this is like vintage 76 anger at my brother. Like, whoa.
So true.
And that attitude it just totally changes how you deal with the zoo. And so it doesn't mean that when objectively infuriating things happen, you can see them on Anderson's show nightly on CNN. When objectively infuriating, I'm not talking about you specifically. No. When things are going wrong in the world, that doesn't mean that we can't sit up and call it out as bad and take action. It just means that we can do it in a place where we're not tied up in knots of fury. But would you say that I'm on the right track with that?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't actually think of it so much in terms of happiness, although I do feel happier because of my practice. I think of it more about sanity, that I can just I can see more clearly what's going on in my life. I can see more clearly, and I can experience more fully when I'm happy, and I can experience more fully, actually, when I'm sad, if that's depending on what's appropriate to the moment. So I'm more actually available to the full configuration of what's on tap. And then the other piece around it is, the thing about a practice and about a meditation is you're kind of training how you want to exist. So if you want to train yourself to be more joyful and more compassionate, those skills are buildable. But a lot of people are more interested in training more focus or training more of this kind of clarity, sanity piece. It's, you can, literally the intention you have in a practice and the kind of techniques you choose can help shape the kind of mind that you're ultimately going to end up with.
You can see why I wanted to write a book with him. Said it better than
And I also just want to point out, after this is done, in a few minutes, Jeff and Dan are going to be signing books, and they're going to be available outside. Another question, have you ever experienced the sense of losing your sense of self while meditating?
Many times, yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, it's meant different things for me over the years. At first, it was like, wow, this is cool, this must be working. And what it meant was just that I would kind of have these feeling like I would kind of disappear, or I would feel like I sort of merged with things around me. And I realized
this happened in the cabin.
Yeah, in the cabin, I'm like merging with the wall. I'm like, oh, the wall is me, I'm the wall. But then I thought, oh yeah, this is really cool, I'm getting somewhere. And so then
Why would that be desirable?
Well,
I think a lot of people are going to ask.
So that's the thing. So I thought, because I read all the propaganda, and I thought that's what's supposed to happen, so I was wanting those things to happen, so I started making them a thing. And I considered a period of serious practice immaturity. I didn't really realize the thing I was really trying to get to was right here. It was like I thought I was trying to get to some special state, so you can create those effects. But really, when you look at long-term practitioners talk about where the practice brings them, this is where it brings them. It brings them, not on stage, probably not at all. They'd be like, God, definitely not. Maybe. But where it really brings you is just to being okay with what's happening right now, with the richness and fullness of the present moment. It's that equanimity stage. Equanimity as a stage is where people end up, and that is a very different way than thinking about peak experiences, And so that's how I think of it now. I think that's where I actually think oneness is, in a way. It's not some merging with a wall. Oneness is just not kind of. It's just being openly appreciative to everything that's going on and not having your own ego constantly jumping front and center.
This idea of selflessness, that you lose yourself in the process of meditation, can be thought of in many ways, many of them completely unconstructive and unhelpful. But one way that I found helpful to think about it is not taking everything that happens in your mind personally.
Yeah, totally.
And so that anger can come up, but you don't have to think of it as your special anger that it was bequeathed to you by all of your suffering forebears and as a result of something somebody said to you in second grade. It could just be seen in an impersonal way, just the way you see the weather. It's just the coming together of impersonal conditions that create a storm. And you don't have to feed it through neurotic obsession. You can actually just let it pass. That, to me, is a helpful way to think about not self, as it's called in Buddhism.
Here's a comment by somebody. They say, meditation in American culture still seems geared towards the socioeconomic elite. How do you suggest we bring meditation to a more diverse group, especially those who could benefit the most, such as young people in underserved communities?
I mean, this is something we talk about in the book. It's something we both feel very strongly about. I mean, as an example, not long ago, Time magazine ran a cover article about meditation, and they had this beautiful blonde woman floating into the cosmos on the cover. And as happy as I was about the fact that Time magazine was covering this, I felt, and many people agreed, that it sent the wrong message. It sent the message that meditation is for, upper middle class people who live on the Upper West Side and shop at Whole Foods. Which, by the way, nothing against those people. I am one of those people. But meditation is not. It's just a weird historical quirk that meditation in this country at this time has largely been the province of that socioeconomic group. Because meditation was invented on the Indian subcontinent millennia ago. It has been practiced all over the planet by lots of different people in lots of different places, disconnected in time and geography. And it's for everyone. This is, as I said before, for anybody who is part of Homo sapiens sapiens. And which one of the beautiful things that's been happening in recent years is that you see it being taught in prisons, in foster homes, in public schools in the inner city. And, I would like to see it taught in public schools all over the place, in basic training in the military.
Yeah, I mean, you interview Congressman Ryan Tim Ryan, right? Yeah, who I actually was at a meditation retreat with, and he's a Democrat from Ohio, I think, and he's trying to get in the schools in his districts, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the answer. Get it in schools so everybody, because it's basic mental hygiene.
Two other things. Do your eyes have to be closed to meditate? Is it helpful to listen to music when you meditate?
No, eyes don't need to be closed. And music, it's up to you. Sometimes it'll be distracting. If you find that having background music allows you to get more absorbed, then it's great. You can also use music as the thing you're meditating on. So just listening really to the music, listening to the pauses between the notes, you can go right down the rabbit hole with that. So why not?
I think we're about at the end of the time. But is there, for both of you, I mean, is there something you want to leave people with before you go and sign books? And
I don't give it a shot. 5 minutes, we just did one. Who kind of liked that practice? All right. Who was like,
but let me tell you something about this audience. If you ask them, did you hate it? The same people are going to raise their hand.
All right. I'll just ask the one question then. Thanks.
I would say exactly what Jeff said. Give it a shot. I think it doesn't need to be some big thing that sucks up all of your time. It doesn't need to be something that you need to worry about, like Anderson talked about falling off the wagon. That is totally natural too. The one thing we learned in writing this book and studying behavior change science, habit formation, is that the best way to embrace or to establish an abiding habit is to approach the endeavor with a sense of experimentation. We did not evolve to readily adopt long-term healthy habits. We evolved for threat detection, looking for saber-toothed tigers, and for finding sources of pleasure like food and mates. Because evolution didn't care about your long-term health, it cared about getting your DNA into future generations. And so just knowing that we're wired to fail in this way can allow you to come to embrace, to sort of approach this practice of trying to start a healthy habit with a sense of like, it's okay if I fail, I can just start again. And by the way, that's the same thing you do in meditation.
Well, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Harris, Jeff Warren.